Good morning, my creative friends. Dr. Minette Riordan here. This is Painting in Your PJs live with Minette, and I feel like I am finally making some progress on this deck of oracle cards that I'm creating, and that I'm starting to find my voice and the style of face that I want to create through many iterations, lots of practice, and just consistent commitment to showing up to the page every single day. So if finding your style is something you're struggling with, I want to recommend that you just paint a lot and that you paint small. I think there's something about painting small that's really helped me to kind of settle in to this sort of bolder, more abstract style. And these aren't all exactly the same, but I love them all. We'll see if they all end up in the deck. I finished this one that I had started yesterday. I spent some time this morning finishing and repainting and touching up, and repainted this one, and now I really love her. And I just start to take my time with all of them, but I'm seeing again that palette, right, is all the same, and the styles and the marks are some similar, some different, some a little bit more realistic, some a lot more wonky and abstract. And I'm really loving these kind of wonky abstract ones. And so I took some time this morning to, good morning, Blanca, buenos dias. Took some time this morning to draw a couple ahead of time. I had one more here too. Oh, it's underneath that, I was sketched out, but that's as far as I got. And so I'm going to spend some time adding paint to at least these two, maybe three, trying to get that process down to add to the consistency of the practice and the style, and also to make things go faster. So backgrounds first, drawing faces second, adding the paint third, and then adding marks and details at the very end seems to be the right direction to go. And this was a design I found online that I really love and want to make my own. This one feels like connection and family, and so I like where it's going. And I'm going to get some paint down on my palette in my three colors. So we have the Azo Yellow Deep, my favorite turquoise blue, quinacridone magenta, and this is a primary palette. Good morning, Yvonne. Tell your husband I said thank you so much for his compliment. I totally received that. And this is basically a primary palette, right? So I put that just out of the camera there. So I'm basically working with a version of a red, a version of a blue, and a yellow. I also have a little bit of white for highlights here. Excuse me. Haven't done any talking this morning yet, so my voice is a little off. Yes, I'm enjoying them as well, and I'm enjoying the process as much as I am enjoying the end products of these. And I hear people talk all the time about wanting to, find their unique voice, find their style, not copy what others are doing. We all love to take lots and lots of classes. And honestly, the secret to finding your style is just to make a lot of art and not to expect it to find it right away. So I've been working on this deck for about 3 weeks now. Sorry, that wet peen. As soon as I add water to it, it gets really, really shiny. And I've done a lot of cards so far, and I haven't loved all of them, but as I went back and looked at them, and I have pages and pages of faces that I've drawn that I haven't transferred to cards yet, but through that just practice of iteration and consistency, I've really been able to kind of settle into what feels like my style. And I wasn't in a rush to get there, but now that I feel like I am there, I feel like I can kind of catch my breath, I can kind of relax a little bit, and then it gives me a little bit of a chance to make some quicker progress on these cards. Do a little color mixing here. It looks like a variety of wet colors of paint on my palette there, so that didn't come out quite as orange as I wanted. Let's see if we can brighten that up just a little bit. And none of the faces that I made were bad, were wrong. There were just some that I liked better than others. And I think that's normal when you're creating a deck of oracle cards like this. Don't expect to love every card that you make. In fact, I think you should expect to make way more cards than you need, and then pick the best of the lot. And another thing that really helps when you're trying to discover your own creative voice or your own creative style is to work in a series. So that's what I've opted to do here, is to work in a series that's all about faces. And I'm going to do that again in September. I'm going to do a month of botanicals in September. And I have an iPhone and a computer full of, at this point, probably thousands of flower photos that I have taken over the years, and I've always wanted to do something with them. So I'm going to think about by September 1st what I want that to be. And so we're going to switch in September from faces to the theme of botanicals. And I often, like at least once a year, I'll spend probably a month focused on drawing botanicals. I love them. I incorporate them into my work a lot. And then I'm thinking in September, October, yeah, that maybe it's going to be a month of animals, because I really wanted to create an animal deck. And as I'm working in kind of this folk art style, it's kind of given me some inspiration for where I would want to go with a deck of animal cards, that I want them to be the same style, right? I want it to get to that point where these things feel recognizable. So when people see them, they go, oh, that's Minette's work. And I have that somewhat with my tangled animals already, but I want to focus on doing more of those, and they're probably going to get combined with some of those botanicals. So I feel like I have a plan for what's going forward, which feels really good. I realize that his eyes are really big. Okay, that's got water on it. So when I'm working with acrylics this way, Diego, be quiet, dude. A very dry brush is really key to, keeping the paint where you want it, not having it kind of flow in places that you don't want it. So I'm very present to how much water is in my brush. And these quirky faces are making me super happy. I knew when I drew this one that it would be a fun one to draw. All right, buddy, come on. He is needing lots of attention this morning. This is about the 14th time that he's been up and down off my lap. All right, you can sit. And so I'm thinking I need something bright and contrasting in the center here. So maybe a nice bright green would be fun to add a little bit of variety. And I don't have a mouth down here, but we might need to just add a bit of a mouth. Get just a little bit of white highlights in here. And it's interesting, some of these come together so fast, so this one feels like one that's going to end up coming together quickly. What are you two or anybody else that's watching? What are you guys working on this morning? Anything fun going on over there? Any fun projects? And Yvonne, thanks for making time to stop by before you have to get the kiddos off to school. Also beginning in September, I will be going back to my winter hours, to my earlier schedule. So I will be at 7 a.m. Mountain Time. That's going to be super early for my West Coast friends. And 8 a.m. Central and 9 a.m. over on the East Coast. Okay, so that feels like a fun first layer. I'm going to stop right there for a minute because I'm going to want to come back with the black lines and with, some decorations and details. Just hanging out. You got a nice cup of coffee to sip on while you're hanging out. Let's see. Need a little bit more. Oh yeah, that's what they need. A little bit more pop of yellow. Sometimes when I'm working over these darker layers, it definitely takes a couple of layers of the acrylic, especially yellow is very transparent. But I'm feeling like I want to just kind of brighten all of this up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to pause there with that one and I'm going to come back to this one. Just sitting sounds absolutely lovely. And I still have a bunch of green paint on this brush, which is why I'm still holding on to it. So let's get some color down on this cutie pie. And I don't know that any of that is going to stay green, but mostly I just want to use up some of the paint on my brush here. And I'm definitely liking the faces where there's a big variety of color on the faces. And I never like to waste paint, so I'm always, and this brush was holding a lot of paint. So I'm just working on using up that paint. Even if it all gets painted over, it just adds to the layers that I'm working on. And then I'm not wasting paint and I'm also not putting extra paint into the water system, which is not good for our water. Yeah, so definitely loving the swatches of bright, bold color over trying to make the faces look more realistic. I think they're more interesting and more fun. Let's get a little orange going here. Go on, buddy. Diego hears my husband up in the kitchen and he's like, oh, maybe there's food up there for me. And then, of course, he got distracted by attacking his sister. Ah, cats. And I'm not worried about covering up those black lines. They're really there as guidelines, and I will come back and darken all of those lines up again, but it makes it easier to have those guidelines for painting in. And what I'm noticing this morning is that because I have already been painting for a little while and I had already drawn the faces, I'm sort of settling in a lot quicker to the process and the practice. And because I've settled on my style and I have a sense of where I'm going, that these are going to come together, especially if I take the time to do the drawing ahead of time, that I can start to have these come together a lot quicker, which is the goal, because at some point I would actually like to finish this deck and be able to use it. So this deck is going to be a tool that is inside of my Your Midlife Renaissance program, so people in that program will get a copy. And we'll see if I decide that it's something that I want to bring to market and sell as its own product as well. I haven't decided yet. But I'm happy with the way all of these are turning out. I love they're just coming along a little more quickly. Diego, stop. All right, let's get some pink on her. So she's got a little flower in her hair here, and I'll come back and again add more detail to all of these things with the black. Give her some color in her cheeks here. And again, I was impatient there and didn't wait for that to dry, so my colors are getting a little dark. I am in go mode, and I think part of it's kind of also because I'm coming to the end of the month. I'm not getting bored with this project, but I'm also feeling the need to move on. I have a lot of projects in the queue. And I'm excited to get to the part I'll probably record some, not live videos, but I'll do some recorded videos about the next level of the process once all the faces are done. That's just the very, very beginning of the journey. Once these faces are painted, there's still attaching meaning, doing the writing of the descriptions. So there's still a lot to do. This is just that first step, right? It's just that first step in the process. And of course, it's also the most fun step in the process, but all of the steps are important. So I'm actually excited to get to the part where I figure out, what am I going to do with these? What is that going to look like? I want her to kind of have a little headband on there. Give that little pink flower in her hair some detail. And where I started to lay in the color, I'm just coming back and going over all of that color one more time to just brighten it up, create a little more opacity. And sometimes I get a little too much paint on there and then I have some correction to do, but it's all good. There we go. That's what that needed, was some yellow. So love how she's coming together. She just kind of looks calm and peaceful. And I'm thinking I'm going to repeat that same sweet little floral pattern on her blouse down here. I have no idea yet. Great question. So I've seen some decks where they pick one of the cards to put on the designs to put on the backs of all of them. And since I want the focus of this to be your midlife renaissance, and our logo for that is a compass rose. And so it might be, it was not the color I wanted at all. So it might be that the compass rose gets drawn or painted on the other side. But today, right now, I cannot tell you how that's going to look. So I'm just mixing that pink and white just right onto the surface of my piece here as I go to kind of get that color that I want. And it feels like she has a good start. So I'm going to come in here with some white, and there's probably still a little pink on my brush, and we're just going to get some of these little flower patterns down, starting with that white to make sure we get some nice pops of color. And come back with that magenta and just sort of blend that in to give the sense of some abstract, I don't know, maybe peonies, maybe little roses. But I like her. She's feeling kind of very girly and feminine. Can never have too many dots. Make those just a little bit lighter. There we go. Excuse me. Okay, so I need to let her dry. Thanks, Yvonne. Have a great rest of your day. Yeah, she did come out sweet, didn't she? She's very sweet. Okay, let's let her dry. Come back to this fun grouping here. And I want a little bit of a pattern in the center, but it could be a little more subtle. I think first I'm going to start and come back with those black lines. Kind of my favorite part. And we'll start to bring in some funky pattern on our faces. Just give us a chance to go in and do some fun detail. Just continue to neaten things up. Maybe we'll continue those spiral patterns. And maybe some dots on this face. And I think this guy's gonna need to have a neck. It's really the only one we can kind of see the neck on. All right, so I'm sort of looking in the center. I wish I'd brought down my folk art fusion. And I think he needs we need to just see that little tiny bit of a mouth there. To maybe look at some patterns in the background. But I'm thinking squares. I've got a lot of round movement going on, so I'm thinking some squares would be really fun, and I'm thinking orange would be a good contrast, which means I'm also going to come in and I think this one's just about dead. Let's see if there's an orange in here. This may be too dark. All right, it's a red orange, but I'm going to go with it for the moment. And I might add a little yellow over the top of that. That's definitely too dark for the background. Let's try. I got a set. I can't remember if I showed these to you guys or not, but I got a set of these paint markers on Amazon because I was looking for a variety of greens, and this one had a really nice variety of greens to finish up a large painting I was working on. They're by Thule Art, and I really, really like them. They're very fine tips, so I want to try some of the different tips next time that I need to buy some paint markers. There we go. Just need to get that started. Oh, that is a lovely bright, bright orange. And I'm just sort of staggering that pattern a little bit. Again, just creating I don't know why I'm creating the patterns because I love them so much. But a lot of folk art and primitive art has a lot of very patterned work in it, and I think it's one of the things that I love, probably inspired by my love of zentangle. It may be a little too bright, so I'm going to have to just kind of maybe sit with that for a little bit and see how I feel. But I'm going to go ahead and bring this bright orange into my faces in a few other spots. But I love the tips on these Thule art pens, and I also love the opacity. They have a nice texture and flow. And these earthy tones are fun to play with. It's funny when I get into doing the really detailed part, I find it hard to do the details and talk as well. So you notice that I tend to get more silent. And again, just kind of leaning into now that I've sort of settled on this style and I know where I'm going, there's going to be similarities and repetitions in the things that I create, which actually helps me to go a little bit faster and also to kind of create a library of patterns and designs. Kind of feeling like he needs some, maybe a little white. Just right down the tip of his nose, give him a little, Just bringing in some of those pops of light. And again, this is the place where I get started and I can find it really hard to stop because the adding the dots and the lines is one of my favorite parts. And by adding the dots to all of them, it kind of makes them feel like they're family. Oh, I love that. You've copied the faces and drawn some smaller, some larger. Yeah, beautiful. I had a ton of fun in my journal last week practicing some full page ones as well. Really enjoyed doing the full page ones. And I think we're just going to continue with our white here just to continue to brighten things up just a little bit. And I often find that it's that combination of the black and the white together that adds those final pops that make me really happy. And I'm trying to decide if I feel like that center section is almost maybe a little too bright, and so I might go over it one more time with a coat, once I'm sure that's really dry, with a coat of a light green. So keeping it green. Okay, those guys feel super, super fun, but this center I need to push it back a little bit. And yeah, Blanca, working with the limited palette will really, show you if you love the palette or not. So I have really enjoyed working with that limited palette. It's really pushed me to mix my own colors. So I added a little bit of water to this because I don't want to completely lose that pattern in the background, but I need it to be a lot more subtle because I feel like I'm seeing more of the pattern than the faces. I also realize I need to paint my neck over here to match the face. So I can still see that pattern underneath. But by just pushing that back a layer, then my faces are really standing out from the background. And I want to see the faces, not the background. And I love that bright green, so might just bring in a few more little pops of that. And I get inspired by, hearing what other people are focused on as well and where they're using this inspiration to go their own direction with these projects. All right, now we've got a little bit of a neck there. I'll need to touch up that black just one more time. So I'm liking this purple, so I think I'm going to add just a little more of that purple. But now I'm noticing I want more contrast between the background and the brights on the face, so I'm going to lighten up that yellow even a little bit more. And just come in with a brighter yellow here. And again, so the intention here is to increase the contrast where I feel like everything's gotten just a little bit too much the same. So I'm not loving that yellow, so I'm thinking it needs to be maybe orange. So that's not quite working for me. So let's see what happens. I don't want to darken that up, but I do want to shift the color. So adding a little, making it just a little more peachy. We'll set it aside. There'll be a little more contrast here between the two colors. So that feels a little bit better. I've got some cleanup to do with my black. I kind of like that orangey color better than just that pure yellow, so that feels good. These definitely are feeling yeah, my sketches and my big ones are all in my sketchbook as well, but I think part of what I'm finding that I'm enjoying is working on these smaller surfaces. Um, it takes for me some of the, the fear of faces out, but because I've done a couple of those bigger ones and I've done all these small ones, I'm feeling inspired to come in and do some of these on. I have some beautiful wood scraps from a girlfriend who's a woodworker, and maybe doing some of these on some bigger pieces of wood. Okay, I'm not being patient enough to wait for that to dry, so my posca is not very happy with me. And I'm thinking I actually want a bolder line there. So just back and forth until we get it exactly like we want it. So many of my poscas are definitely well used and well loved. I think what is missing here is I want to pull that blue down just a little bit. Totally, Blanca, I love that. Just following along, getting motivated, and you will find your own style. It's how we all start, right? It's why there's so much benefit to taking a variety of classes from a variety of people and a variety of styles, because you start to see what you enjoy. You start to combine the different styles into something that begins to feel completely unique to you. Okay, so I'm going to set that one aside. And I'm pretty happy with that one. But I'm not 100% certain it's done, but it's done for now. And I'm going to come back to our sweet little chicky poo here, go back over those black lines, and then add some of those patterns and details. She should be dry enough. And I've decided that I like the outlines done with this bigger, bolder black instead of that fine black. I really like that look. I'll come in with the finer black and add some veins to those leaves. can tell I'm concentrating because I'm getting quiet. Probably could have done those finer black around those eyes, but this is why I think it's important, whatever brand of paint marker that you're using, to make sure that you have a nice selection of tip sizes. Come in with those fun patterns. This is where I have that chance to make these designs really my own. And I'm feeling like we need just a few of these little leaves in here, so we'll add some nice bright green leaves. In the background, and then our background pattern, let's make that kind of a leaf shape as well. And I'm going to draw them first just to have a little more control over where they're going. They might end up even just being yellow in the background. Be mindful not to drag my hand through. And sometimes the posca is actually pulling up the paint. This must have had some oil pastel because I can see where it's kind of moving back to the background. All right, she needs some, oh, I see, that was her headband there. And I think she needs some color in her eyes as well. So let's see if we can give her some green eyes. I think that one's almost dead. There we go. And we're going to want to come in and whiten up those whites of her eyes as well. Again, I'm being impatient and not waiting for the paint to dry, so it's going to take maybe a couple of layers. And gel pen is great for doing some of this detail work. It doesn't have to be Posca paint markers, but the gel pens also don't like wet paint. I'm noticing where in some places where they don't want to have as much coverage. Okay, so those are going to need to have some touch-ups a little bit later on. I think I'm going to come back with some of this super bright orange and just have a little bit of that nice fun bright around her face, and Just going to give the hair a little bit more curl and texture. And then we'll pull that same orange into a few other places in our design. Maybe not quite enough contrast there. I do really love the tips on these Thule paint markers. And now she just needs some little touches of white to brighten her up, and we need to paint those leaves in the background. I feel like I got to do some work on her eye, but she needs to be completely dry. Okay, that yellow was what was needed there. Instead of that orange, just really brighten that up. Put just a little bit of yellow in the center. Maybe just a little touch on those leaves just to brighten her up. I'm happy with where she's going. I think I want to brighten up some of these colors as well. Let's come in with some little centers on our flowers here. Again, remembering, and I shared this yesterday, that when things get printed and reproduced, it darkens the colors. So if my original design ends up being too dark, I have to remember that it's going to be a shade darker when it gets printed. Okay, that's not wanting to go in there. Let's go back. There we go. So being very mindful, right, that all right, I had to touch these eyes up just a little bit again, but I just felt like I wanted a little more white in there, so now I'm going to bring some of that green back, but I wanted to get the whites of her eyes in there. And then just looking for those few places where it feels like I can come in with a little bit of pattern. Doesn't have to be a lot. And just have that add to the design. So I love her. Again, I feel like this has gotten a little too monochromatic and maybe a little neutral. So I think I might come in and just brighten up some of the colors in her face. One more time. And what did I do with this? Let's see, this was the green that I used in her eyes, so let's try this for our leaves. And here I'm okay if I cover up some of those black lines that I drew as guidelines. I don't need there to be a lot of black. But once I get started, I'm like, oh, I just want to sit here and spend all day painting these little faces, but I don't get to do that. And every evening I think, oh, I'm going to go spend an hour drawing, and then by the end of the work day, I'm like, no, I'm a little tired. So I'm definitely feeling like I want to carve out a little more time to work on these and move the deck along a little bit. Okay, she's cute. That is not this green I use for her eyes. So I'm going to want to darken up her eyes a little bit. And I may want to darken up these leaves a little bit as well. That's better. Not a lot of difference between those two greens when you get it layered on here, but I think just enough. So interesting. So knowing that I'm scraping back underneath to the thank you, Blanca. Have a wonderful day as well. That I'm scraping all the way back here to the oil pastel underneath. I have to be mindful of that. And I just want to brighten her up just a pop. Even that's better, and it feels like she needs just a touch more yellow. And then I'm going to be done for today. So where I had some of this yellow in here, I just want to come back and do another layer of that yellow. I want a little bit brighter pink under her eyes. Yeah, that's what it needed. We just those upper layers and the mark making needs to be nice and bright. Let's bring some of that pink into her sweet little mouth there. Again, just having that intention just to brighten everything up a little bit at the end makes such a big difference. Okay, so I am going to stop there and call her done, but good progress made today with these two cards that, again, they're slightly different in style, but the marks are the same and the palette is the same. So I'm happy with the progress on these two that I made today. And what's today is Thursday. So I will see you guys all next week on Tuesday, same time, same place. Have a wonderful weekend. And thank you so much for joining me today. Whether you join me live or watch the replay, I so appreciate you being here. Have a great day.